What exactly are devil fruit? When did they come into being? And how did they impact the history of the One Piece world? These questions are becoming increasingly important as Luffy and Kaido's battle on Wano approaches its climax. It would seem both of their powers hold narrative significance, and so in a sense, you could view this war to liberate Wano as a battle between these two devil fruit powers. In an ongoing video series, I've explained in part why I believe the mythical fish fruit possessed by Kaido is so important. In short, I believe as an Eastern-style dragon, he's been imbued with incredibly good fortune, particularly when facing an opponent one-on-one. I also explained why I believe the mythical fish fruit may have once been treasured by the celestial dragons who lived on the lost island of God Valley. Yet we're still only scratching the surface when it comes to the mystery of the mythical fish fruit. I want to move on and discuss some of the details about Kaido and Momo's devil fruit recently revealed by CP0, but first want to establish a couple key points regarding devil fruit in general. So in today's video, we're going to be discussing exactly what devil fruit are, how they function, and how they may be related to the central mystery of One Piece. Before getting started, welcome if you're new to the channel. I do weekly One Piece chapter reviews, theory videos, and discussions. So if you're interested, please consider subscribing and remember to hit the bell icon to turn on notifications. It really helps this channel grow and I really appreciate your support. Devil fruit impart their wielders with all sorts of strange abilities, but what do we really know about them? Where do they come from? And when were they introduced into the One Piece world? As stated during the introduction, I believe the origin and true nature of devil fruit is deeply related to the central narrative arc and mystery of One Piece. It's important to remember just how deliberate and consistent Oda has been regarding the lore and distribution of devil fruit throughout the One Piece world. In the Four Blue Seas, devil fruit are said to be incredibly rare, to the extent that they're regarded as myth or legend. They are specifically referred to as a treasure from the Grand Line, and accordingly very few pirates outside the Grand Line are demonstrated to wield these powers. Oda introduced only 4 confirmed devil fruit users in the entirety of the East Blue saga: Luffy, Buggy, Alvida, and Smoker. Even if we consider Monkey D. Dragon to be a likely 5th devil fruit user introduced during the East Blue, it's still remarkable how few characters derive their strength from the same source as Luffy in the first 2 years of publication. The One Piece world is filled with fantastical elements, so it's sometimes easy to lose the signal in the noise, or in other words, differentiate which things are part of the central mystery and conflict and which are simply part of the fantastical backdrop. When the story began, devil fruit at first glance would seem to simply be the means by which Oda explains the strange powers and abilities wielded by the characters in his story world. There need not necessarily be any greater narrative emphasis placed on what they are and where they come from. There are many strange things in the One Piece world which likely aren't going to receive any detailed origin story or explanation. Generally speaking, the magic or power systems in works of fiction are sometimes, but not always, related to the central conflict or mystery of the respective stories. The cause for the mutant X gene doesn't need to be a mystery for the story of X-Men to function, for example. We never learn why magic exists in the world of Harry Potter, Nen in the world of Hunter x Hunter, or Chi in the world of Dragon Ball. These magic or power systems are simply immutable aspects of the respective story worlds. My point here is that there's no reason to immediately suspect the very existence and nature of devil fruit needs to be explained. Yet in retrospect, we can see just how intentional Oda's application of devil fruit abilities has been from the very first chapter. New information even recontextualized the manner in which Luffy and Buggy, 2 of the 4 wielders from the East Blue, received their devil fruit powers, as we learned both were made accessible through having connections to other more important and powerful pirates or world government agents. It's also of course worth mentioning that Dr. Vegapunk, who we will discuss more later in this video, is actively researching the mystery of devil fruit. Think about this from Oda's perspective. He devised a system to explain superpowers in his story, yet showed incredible restraint in not using it extensively until the Straw Hats arrived in the Grand Line. Morgan, Kuro, Krieg, Arlong, Django, Pearl, Gin, Moji, and Kabaji all had unique combat styles without relying on devil fruit abilities. In the East Blue, Buggy was the only devil fruit wielding primary antagonist Luffy faced, yet as soon as the Straw Hats entered the Grand Line, where devil fruit are believed to originate, they are commonly found in the possession of not only major antagonists like Crocodile, but also underlings like Mr. 5, Miss Valentine, and Mr. 3. The frequency with which devil fruit users are introduced increased dramatically as soon as the Straw Hats left the East Blue behind, yet they are still regarded as something rare and special, and Oda is still deliberate in where they are commonly found and where they aren't. In Skypiea, for example, the only Devil Fruit users are Eneru and Pierre, both of whose Devil Fruit originate elsewhere because they are not commonly found on the White Sea. Importantly, during the CP9 saga, when Spandam provided 2 Devil Fruit for Kaku and Khalifa upon the return to Enies Lobby, these very well-informed world government intelligence officers marveled at his possession of what are considered to be such a rare treasure, to the extent that they felt the need to ask how the head of CP9, an elite officer, was able to acquire them. Spandam said he relied upon his connections to acquire these 2 Devil Fruit, which, when combined with the knowledge Luffy's fruit was stolen from a government ship guarded by Who's Who, implies individuals even higher in the world government chain of command control the source and distribution of Devil Fruit. As the series has progressed, we have even learned that Devil Fruit are a secondary power or magic system. Haki is the true primary underlying power system in the One Piece world, which governs and supersedes Devil Fruit. What all of this establishes is that Devil Fruit are far more than a means to a narrative end. They are more than a superpower delivery system. Much like alchemy in Full Metal Alchemist, quirks in My Hero Academia, and the Force in Star Wars, the very nature and existence of the power or magic system is part of the central conflict and mystery which has been slowly uncovered throughout the Straw Hats' voyage. Indeed, we have seen Devil Fruit play an increasingly prominent role in the story. There have been hints from very early on, but part of the reason it was easy to mistake Devil Fruit as part of the fantastical backdrop for Luffy's journey is because there was no immediate narrative significance to the Devil Fruit powers wielded by some of his earlier opponents. For example, Crocodile's sand powers, Lucci's leopard fruit, and Moria's shadow powers made them much more deadly opponents than they would have been without Devil Fruit, yet those particular abilities were not directly related to the conflict in the story arcs in which they served as primary antagonist. The leopard fruit had no greater relevance or importance to Water 7, Robin's lifelong struggle against the darkness of the world government, or the Straw Hats' quest to liberate her from CP9's clutches. Comparatively, Devil Fruit have played a much more prominent role throughout the current story saga. Kaido, Caesar, and Doflamingo's entire operation was based on the manufacture and distribution of artificial Devil Fruit known as Smile. Luffy and Law's strategy to topple Kaido was accordingly reliant upon dismantling this artificial Devil Fruit pipeline. The conflict on Dressrosa between Law and Doflamingo was incited years earlier by Doflamingo's quest to take possession of the Op fruit Rocinante instead gifted to Law. Oda further showed us how Doflamingo acquired his own string Devil Fruit from Treble. As an aside, I think Treble may be an agent of Cypherpole sent to radicalize little Doflamingo and groom him for his role as underworld broker to unknowingly serve the world government's interest, but that's a topic for another day. Big Mom's Kingdom of Souls in Totland was created entirely through her Devil Fruit ability, and just like Doflamingo, Oda took time to explain where and how she acquired this power through her flashback. We even recently learned that Luffy's Gomu Gomu fruit was once valued and guarded by the world government, and that Kaido insists on installing Yamato as figurehead shogun of Wano, or as he calls it, New Onigashima, solely based on her possessing a particularly important mythical Inu Inu fruit. What this means is that there is good reason to believe that unlike Devil Fruit possessed by earlier antagonists, Kaido's fish model Azura Dragon Fruit is important not only because it imparts him with cool powers and turns him into a big scary dragon for Luffy to punch, but also because the fruit itself is relevant to the current struggle to liberate Wano, as well as the central narrative arc of One Piece. Even more broadly, it's no small coincidence Devil Fruit have received increasing narrative focus as the story heads toward the final saga. Now that we've established the narrative importance of Devil Fruit, we're going to explore what they are and where they come from, but I would first like to make note of a few details. As I said, I believe Devil Fruit are integral to the central mystery of One Piece, which means it's important to review where they might fit into One Piece world history. I'm going to try to keep this part of the discussion succinct without going too far off topic, as I'm going to explore many of these topics in greater depth in future parts of this video series. The One Piece world is presently ruled by the world government, which rose to power during the Void Century, also referred to by Gold Roger as Joy Boy's era. The world government has erased all record of this lost epoch, except for the indestructible poneglyphs which both record the true history and point the way toward the final island of the Grand Line where One Piece is hidden. Although Joy Boy's funny traveling tale took place during the Void Century, we also know there was a war between the Alliance of 20 Kings and a vast forgotten kingdom, which once possessed the 3 ancient weapons Poseidon, Pluton, and Uranus. 19 of the 20 kings gathered in a location referred to as the center of the world and descended to live in the so-called Holy Land Marishwa, and their descendants, the celestial dragons or world nobles, are now revered as gods. Though the 5 elders, elite among the world's nobility, are outwardly regarded as the world's highest authority, the empty throne in truth is occupied by Lord Emu, the enigmatic figure to whom the elders bow in secret. 8 centuries ago, when Joy Boy's era came to a close, he and his friends around the world left behind the means by which the world's oppressors may eventually be unseated. We know the Treasure One Piece is meant to serve a purpose, that those around the world who protect the poneglyphs and guard the path to the treasure are waiting for a future promised day, when Joy Boy returns and the world is guided toward a new dawn. Those, like Luffy, who carry the name D, are referred to as enemies of the gods. As I will further detail in later parts of this video series, I believe there's a chance the dragon figure on which Momo and Kaido's devil fruit is patterned is based on the mythological sea dragon Ryujin, indicated by the structure of Ryugu Palace. Based on its mythological roots, I think it's possible this figure embodies the power of the sea, and may even be responsible for construction of the Grand Line itself. This is important to keep in mind when we later consider the relationship between devil fruit wielders and the sea. The world government in One Piece represents oppression and division, and it's no small coincidence their holy city sits atop the 10-kilometer tall Red Wall, which divides the world's oceans. The Lunarians were once similarly revered and occupied a so-called land of gods in the same location. In fact, it would seem the Red Line and Grand Line, which are positioned orthogonally, represent these diametrically opposed forces, oppression and freedom respectively. Importantly, there's evidence these 2 geographic superstructures were artificially constructed to serve counter purposes, and as I detailed in an earlier video, the nomenclature of the world's 2 calendar systems indicates this struggle between freedom and oppression predates the world government, and the war which took place during the Void Century. The central conflict in One Piece pits those who pursue freedom against the world's oppressors, and while I won't get into the full moral complexity of this conflict in today's video, ultimately piracy is the vehicle by which people in this world governed by dark forces pursue freedom. The sea is the ultimate representation of this freedom, and the power of the sea has been a recurrent motif throughout the entire series. This is important to keep in mind, as those who have eaten devil fruit are often referred to as enemies of the sea. There's a reason the New Dawn can only be delivered by the future Pirate King, who inherits Joy Boy's will as well as the Treasure One Piece. Admittedly, much of this theory is going to hinge on other theories or personal speculation, but ultimately I believe Joy Boy was the world's first forgotten Pirate King, who attempted to change the world by unifying those who pursue freedom under the Jolly Roger, taking inspiration from the real-world utopian myth of Libertalia. This forgotten kingdom assembled the ancient weapons for this very purpose, yet there are 2 distinct brands of piracy in the One Piece world, and it's possible this division between archetypal peacemains and Morganeers corrupted or compromised Joy Boy's dream from within. Importantly, the fact that Vivi's ancestor ranked among the 20 kings suggests they didn't initially band together with evil intent. There, at the very least, appeared to be just cause in opposing the Forgotten Kingdom's rise to power, and perhaps this distrust was fundamentally built upon a lie or misunderstanding. And this is where I think it's important to keep in mind the fact that Oda rarely writes one-sided conflicts. He grounds both sides of the conflicts in his stories with clear and understandable motives. The true villains are often outsiders or manipulators, who exploit and worsen existing tension, division, or conflict for personal gain. Crocodile, Eneru, CP9, Blackbeard, Doflamingo, and Kaido have all used similar tactics. They're outsiders, manipulative villains, who instigate or worsen conflicts between 2 groups for their own ends. They have no personal stakes in the outcome, and no true allegiance to either side. We see that the motives of these villains are typically self-serving, and that their subordinates are often cast aside or viewed as expendable. They don't actually care about who wins the conflicts they incite. Oda's villains are also commonly actively working in secret toward their true ultimate goal. Orchestrating these conflicts and taking power is simply a means to an end. There is a sort of fractal nature to Oda's storytelling, As the story progresses, certain self-similar patterns emerge, and I don't mean the abundance of princesses who borrow Nami's face. Individual story arcs mirror or model the broader conflict in the One Piece world narratively and thematically. By examining these patterns, I believe we can both characterize the war which occurred during the Void Century and understand the present state of the One Piece world. We know that there was a conflict between the 20 Kings and the Forgotten Kingdom, and based on established patterns, we can surmise the true villain didn't belong to either group in earnest. I will remind you that Oda has often used Judeo-Christian iconography and motifs to characterize key elements of this central conflict, including the aptly named Devil Fruit. The world doesn't know Imu exists, yet his occupancy of the empty throne indicates he presently rules as the secret king of the One Piece world.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
Well, the devil in the One Piece world does exist, and the world remains unaware of this secret. But even worse, he has convinced the world that his enemies, the ones who stand against him, are their enemies. Despite the formation of the Grand Line by the Sea Dragon, which provided the world the tools needed to fight for freedom, Imu's machinations did not cease, and he soon found in the 20 Kings new apprentices far younger and more powerful. As Shakespeare said, the devil had the power to assume pleasing shapes, and accordingly, Imu likely approached the 20 Kings as a friend, someone who could offer them the power they needed to stop Joy Boy.
And in their desperation, they turned to a man they didn't fully understand.
Crocodile pretended to be the hero of Alabasta, all the while stoking the flames of civil war. The devil brought Jesus to the desert and tempted him with rulership over all the earth, unimaginable material wealth. So what was used to tempt the 20 Kings? What did Imu offer them to earn their allegiance? I believe the answer is the Devil Fruit, which seemed to be an intentional allusion to the lost paradise of Eden, particularly coupled with the Jewel Tree Adam and Sunlight Tree Eve. In Genesis, the devil assumed the form of a serpent and tempted Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, such that they could be like God. The tree existed as an eternal symbol of free will. As long as good is a choice, evil is a possibility which must be continually rejected. Evil is powerless until willingly actualized by those who listen to the voice of the tempter. So perhaps in similar fashion, Imu tempted the 20 Kings to eat the devil's fruit with the promise it would make them like gods in order to vanquish their enemies. After all, we must ask how the 20 Kings were able to triumph in the Void Century War, particularly if the Forgotten Kingdom wielded Pluton, Poseidon, and Uranus. Like Adam and Eve, who committed the original sin by obeying the serpent, perhaps the 20 Kings succumbed to Imu's deception. The Devil Fruit may have once been exclusively granted to the 20 Kings, which allowed them to combat the Forgotten Kingdom. But the devil is a trickster, a deceiver, and the power received did not belong to the 20 Kings to keep. When they died, their powers regrew elsewhere in the world. Over time, they became dispersed throughout the Grand Line and fueled further conflict. I suspect many of the strange phenomena witnessed on the Grand Line may be scars of the cataclysmic war which ensued as the powers became dispersed throughout the entire world. We saw the long-lasting impact of the battle between Akainu and Aokiji on Punk Hazard, which is now transformed into an inhospitable land of ice and fire. One location that particularly stands out is Eni's Lobby, the doorstep to the world government, which features two strange phenomena, eternal sunshine and a bottomless pit which continuously receives the sea. Now of course, all of this begs the question of what exactly are the Devil Fruit, and where do they come from? We know they impart a wide range of powers, some of which are quite strange, but we don't really know how they were made or how they function. The terminology Devil Fruit links them to the story of Eden, and as such, I wonder if perhaps the Sunlight Tree Eve, which grows somewhere in Marijois, could be their origin point, explaining in part why the Holy Land is called the center of the world. Consuming the fruit from the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil came with a heavy cost. Adam and Eve were cast outside of paradise into the land east of Eden, and the garden where both the Tree of Knowledge and the Tree of Life grew was closed off, guarded by angels with flaming swords. Oda doesn't import ideas exactly as they are presented within his sources of inspiration, but here we see some interesting parallels. The Tree of Knowledge and its fruit were planted not by the devil, but by God. The devil in this tale had no creative power of his own, only the ability to persuade. Accordingly, within One Piece, we must ask why Imu even needs mortal servants. Are they somehow necessary to achieve his goals and to realize his desires? It's difficult to say who originally planted the Adam and Eve trees and created the Devil Fruit. It's possible these strange fruit were directly created by the evil entity for whom they are seemingly named, but equally possible the Devil Fruit represent a stolen repository of power. After all, it would seem the Lunarians may have taken inspiration from the angels with flaming swords charged with protecting Eden and the Tree of Life after the fall of Adam and Eve. The Lunarians coincidentally once occupied the center of the world where the Eve tree grows. Perhaps the Lunarians once protected the Eve Tree and the Devil Fruit, but were similarly tempted by Emu and surrendered their position of divine protectors to claim divinity for themselves, and thus opened the window for the 20 Kings to transgress some sort of sacred ground and steal the Devil Fruit. All men dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their mind wake up in the day to find it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they may act their dreams with open eyes to make it possible. As for what the Devil Fruit actually are and how their powers work, I believe the answer may be found in a rather curious line of exposition from chapter 218. The Straw Hats had just departed from Alabasta and discovered Robin stowed away aboard the Going Merry, when suddenly a massive galleon fell from the heavens into the surrounding sea. This scene was accompanied by a narration box which reads, "Anything man can imagine is a possibility in reality." And this quote was attributed to physicist Willie Caron. Anything man can imagine is quite the statement. Even more so when we consider it was attributed to a physicist rather than a pirate or an adventurer, particularly given the themes and inspiration for the Skypiea saga which this scene opens, and the fact that the story follows the adventures of the Straw Hat Pirates. It's easy to imagine an explorer like Noland or a pirate like Roger or Odin captivated by the seemingly limitless potential of the horizon, making such a bold or fanciful claim, that anything imaginable is possible in reality. However, physicists like Willie Caron should in theory make empirically evidenced claims. It's rather conspicuous Oda chose to designate the author of this quote as a scientist, considering he had not highlighted the significance of any particular scientific endeavors or research within the story world up until that moment, aside from the oblique reference to Vegapunk made by Miss Merry Christmas. Notably, no qualifiers were placed on this assertion. Absolutely anything man can imagine is possible.
I don't know, I can imagine quite a bit.
Willie Caron, physicist, was sufficiently convinced through his studies that anything, a term which is by nature nebulous and open to interpretation, is possible in reality.
You're crazy. Am I? Or am I so sane that you just blew your mind?
As crazy as this notion might sound, perhaps this claim was indeed well evidenced and empirically backed.
It's impossible. Is it? Or is it so possible that your head is spinning like a top?
Perhaps it tells us something about the Devil Fruit and how they actually work.
It can't be! Can it? Or is your entire world just crashing down all around you?
After all, Devil Fruit research is an active field of study, and the wide range of powers they confer seemingly fit the description of anything man can imagine. On that note, it's precisely what I believe Devil Fruit actually are and how they function. They distill and invigorate people's dreams. They materialize in objective reality, that which people could otherwise only imagine, and the bounds seem to be limitless. Turn into a house, swim through concrete, duplicate a person's likeness, leap forward through time, turn people into toys. An eclectic assortment of abilities which represent people's dreams or desires. The Devil Fruit allow these dreams to awaken and to be manifest into the world. We know there are 3 primary types or classifications of Devil Fruit: Logia, Zoan, and Paramethea, or Paramecia depending on the translation. There are additional subcategories within the Zoan group, including ordinary, ancient, and mythical models. I believe the term Paramethea used by Viz is more fitting to describe the everything else category of Devil Fruit abilities because it comes from the Greek word for fairy tales, reinforcing the idea that Devil Fruit incarnate people's dreams, anything man can imagine brought to life. This is even more appropriate when we consider the thematic importance of pursuing impossible dreams within One Piece. The quote from Willie Caron appears at the start of the Skypiea saga, which also introduced us to Warlord of the Sea Don Quixote do Flamingo. His name is a reference to Don Quixote de la Mancha, a character from a classic Spanish novel. In the story, an old man, considered to be crazy, transforms the world around him through his pursuit of impossible dreams. He imagines windmills to be dragons and a local barmaid, Dulcinea, to be a noble princess. This story demonstrates the power of imagination to reshape reality, as Don Quixote's delusion transforms the world around him by changing the way others, most notably Dulcinea, view themselves. After being treated as a noble, her self-image improves. Given that this sentiment is birthed by an old man's delusion, you might consider this to be a case of folie à deux, or madness shared by two. But the more charitable interpretation is that what conventional wisdom perceives as madness or senility frees Don Quixote from societal presuppositions to see the invisible truth by recognizing Dulcinea's true qualities, and the fact that his imagination has real-world transformative influence on at least one person's life is proof enough. Despite his namesake, Don Quixote do Flamingo represents a complete inversion of this ideal as he seeks to stamp out people's dreams. It's no small coincidence then that he used his considerable underworld influence to produce artificial devil fruit termed Smile, representing a sort of mockery of the genuine article. Earlier we discussed the fact that as the story has progressed, we have learned that in truth, Haki is the true universal underlying power or magic system in the One Piece world. We know that Haki and Devil Fruit do not operate independently. In truth, Haki governs or supersedes Devil Fruit powers. Armament Haki can be used to render Logia users tangible. Big Mom is unable to steal the lifespan or soul of those with exceptionally strong willpower like Jinbei, and we learned on the roof of Onigashima that Law's body-swapping powers wouldn't work on Kaido or Big Mom because their willpowers are too powerful. From a writing standpoint, this helps prevent certain abilities like Law's, Sugar's, Kuma's, and Toki's from becoming overpowered, but we must also ask why Haki is able to override Devil Fruit powers. I have here suggested that Devil Fruit represent distillations or manifestations of people's dreams, anything man can desire brought to life in reality. Thus, you could also think of a dream as a very strong desire or will. Devil Fruit work by manifesting the desire of whatever living element resides in the fruit in the material world, a very powerful strength of will which, by some mechanism, transforms a dream into reality. Not only does this description resonate with these central themes in One Piece, but it could also fully explain the relationship between Haki and Devil Fruit. Haki is also willpower, and thus an individual with sufficiently strong Haki is able to overpower the desire, will, or dream manifest through use of a Devil Fruit ability. One question which we must ask, if Devil Fruit are indeed living, then what material was used to make them? Artificial Zoan fruit are made from lineage factors collected from currently living animals, explaining why Caesar has only been able to make the ordinary variety. The creatures on which ancient zones are based are extinct, or mostly extinct, making the requisite lineage factor inaccessible without access to an ample number of amber-encased mosquitoes. Momo's Mythical Zone was created from Kaido's lineage factor, explaining how Vegapunk was able to replicate its living component. But what about Logia, or Paramethea, if these are indeed representative of people's dreams? I wonder if the Devil Fruit classification system is based not only on the nature of the powers they confer, but also the material from which they were made. Importantly, those who eat Devil Fruit are cursed with the inability to swim. They become enemies of the sea, the representation of freedom in the One Piece world, which further suggests that these powers were created or stolen by the diametrically opposed oppressive force, aka Lord Emu. Presently, Devil Fruit are being researched by Dr. Vegapunk, further linking them to the statement from physicist Willie Caron. In fact, it seems the study of Devil Fruit is intrinsically linked with most of the most prominent scientists in the One Piece world. Devil Fruit appear to be living or possess some sort of living component. This is evidenced by the fact that inanimate objects infused with Devil Fruit like Lasso, Funkfried, and Bunbuku are brought to life by their Devil Fruit powers. Thus far, only Vegapunk has been able to infuse Devil Fruit into objects and can only do so using Zoan powers. These Devil Fruit infused objects appear to be fully living, possessing a will or spirit of their own. Considering the objects themselves possess no living component, the Devil Fruit must be responsible for their incarnation. Smiley, Sabo, and Giola may also indicate Devil Fruit possess some type of memory of their prior incarnation, though the jury is still out. Giola's living art seems to contain cryptic allusions to the world's lost history, which perhaps not so coincidentally contains a spiral-patterned figure reminiscent of Devil Fruit. Smiley may have remembered the poison candy used to create Shinokuni, evidenced by Caesar's prodding in chapter 676, and Sabo invoked Ace's name when he burned Burgess on Dressrosa. Sabo also exhibited similar behavior to Ace and used one of Ace's signature techniques, which indicates he may not have been speaking figuratively. These scenes perhaps indicate that if Devil Fruit are indeed living, they may retain some element or memory of their previous wielders, though it's worth mentioning there are viable alternative explanations for all of these scenes. While it's an interesting idea to consider, regardless of whether or not there's any truth to Devil Fruit possessing memory, we have good reason to believe that not only are they living, but that they contain a soul of some kind. And this isn't without precedent, as we know some Devil Fruit like Brooks and Big Moms directly relate to the power of souls. As further evidence, Jabra ominously warned that consuming more than one devil fruit invariably results in death because of the warring souls it breeds within. The other CP9 agents dismissed this as mere superstition on the grounds that Vegapunk has already unlocked the many mysteries of devil fruit, but nevertheless it stands that no one, aside from Blackbeard, can possess more than one devil fruit power and live. Oda depicted this reincarnation cycle visually through a simple graphic near the start of Dressrosa. Interestingly, the essence of the fruit, depicted as a soul complete with wings, was shown exiting the body of its deceased user and then entering a nearby fruit of the same type. The soul then transfers to a new host after they have eaten a single bite, rendering the rest of the fruit inert, suggesting the soul immediately transfers fully into its new host. If devil fruit indeed contains souls, it begs the question of which living materials were used to make them. I would like to point out here that the soul component of the devil fruit in this illustration features the same distinctive spiral pattern featured on both the surface and the stem of all devil fruit. I talked briefly about what devil fruit are and how they're dispersed in the One Piece world, but one thing I didn't make mention of is the fact that the swirl pattern on the surface and on the stem seems to be significant. For some reason, it seems that devil fruit powers are linked to the spiral, or I guess you could say there is power in spirals. But what do these spiral patterns mean? Interestingly, I think Sanji and his family's association with Dr. Vegapunk may reveal the answer. Something I want to make note of is the fact that Vegapunk is the premier researcher of devil fruit in the One Piece world, but before joining the SSG working for the world government, he worked for a group called MADS, and this group included Queen, Vegapunk, potentially Caesar Clown, though it has not been confirmed, and of course Sanji's father, Vince Smoke Judge. From the moment Sanji was first introduced, his swirl eyebrow pattern was one of his most distinctive features. We later saw during the Whole Cake Island story arc that all of the Vinsmoke children feature this distinct spiral eyebrow pattern. Now what's notable here is that the spiral pattern matches those on the surface and stem of devil fruit. Vinsmoke Judge experimented on his unborn children by modifying their genetic material, or their lineage factor, but what did he modify them with? He gave them some abilities which resemble those belonging to devil fruit users. Now what's suspicious is the fact that Vinsmoke Judge has prior association with Dr. Vegapunk, which indicates he may have some understanding of how devil fruit work and what they actually are. So what I'm suggesting is that the Vinsmoke children have been modified using lineage factors extracted from devil fruit. I'd like to make note of the fact here that Sanji actually learned about devil fruit, including the invisibility power, through books and resources available in Germa Kingdom. This further indicates that his father participated in Vegapunk's devil fruit research, and that the lineage factor of devil fruit may have been used in modifying the Vinsmoke children. Note that when Sanji's Germa powers awakened while fighting Queen, the spiral pattern on his eyebrows changed directions, or you could say they reversed polarity.
We're both reversing the polarity. Yes, I know that. There's two of us. I'm reversing it, you're reversing it back again. We're confusing the polarity.
So what this indicates is that the spiral eyebrow pattern somehow relates to these Germa powers. So what we know is that Vinsmoke Judge was previously associated with Vegapunk. Vegapunk is doing devil fruit research, and Vinsmoke Judge would thus have some understanding of how they work and what they are. He later experimented on his children using lineage factors to augment their supernatural abilities, most of which resemble those belonging to devil fruit users. Sanji's Germa powers were dormant but awakened during his battle with Queen, at which time his eyebrow spiral pattern changed directions. This indicates that this spiral eyebrow pattern is somehow related to these Germa powers, and it's no small coincidence this spiral pattern matches that on the surface and stem of devil fruit. One final note on this topic, which indicates just how important this spiral pattern is to Sanji's design. Oda originally planned to name Sanji Naruto, but chose not to do so because Masashi Kishimoto's series Naruto began publication in Weekly Shonen Jump in 1999, just before Sanji made his first appearance in the series. So, for those who don't know, Uzumaki Naruto, the main character of that series, is named in reference to a spiral or whirl pattern. Uzumaki is a name which means whirlpool or maelstrom. The name Naruto is a reference to the Naruto whirlpools. These are distinct, powerful whirlpools which are commonly found near the city Naruto in the Tokushima prefecture. Oda actually considered naming Sanji after his spiral eyebrow pattern, which indicates its overall importance. Oda even jokingly responded to a reader question in the Volume 45 SBS by making note of this connection. The reader asks if all devil fruit feature the spiral pattern. Oda responds affirmatively and says that the spiral is what distinguishes them from ordinary fruit. He then says that he wonders whether Sanji is actually a devil fruit, which may have been his comedic way of subtly foreshadowing this connection. Ultimately, it's difficult to say exactly what the spiral pattern means, but based on the fact that the disembodied soul of the fruit features the spiral pattern, I can only surmise there must be some sort of connection between the spiral and the fruit's living component. But I think the stem may be particularly important, which carries some potentially interesting implications for Kaido and the mythical fish model Azure dragon fruit in particular. Artificial smile fruit made by Caesar and Doflamingo have a 1 in 10 chance of imparting powers of some kind, but the souls of the animals contained in the fruit seem to incompletely merge with their hosts, making them far from fully functional. Notably, smile fruit have an ordinary stem and a circular rather than spiral pattern on their surface. Vegapunk labeled the artificial duplicate of Kaido's fruit a failure, yet thus far it appears to be much more effective than Smile in recreating real devil fruit abilities. Notably, we see that though it features the same circle pattern as Smile, Vegapunk's artificial dragon fruit features a spiral stem. This speaks again to the fact that the spiral pattern is related to the functionality and potentially the soul contained within the devil fruit. This is even more interesting in light of the design of Kaido's mythical fish model Azure dragon fruit revealed in One Piece magazine 13. The mythical fish fruit features not 1, but 2 spiral stems.
This is getting out of hand. Now there are 2 of them.
1 blue and 1 pink, which is completely unique among devil fruit designs revealed thus far. It's the only fruit to feature more than 1 stem. Now, I don't know for sure what this means, but the fact that this feature is unique among devil fruit could potentially explain Vegapunk being able to extract some component from Kaido to make Momo's artificial duplicate. So could this mean Kaido's fruit originally contained not 1, but 2 souls? Perhaps this explains the twin dragons in One Piece. It's difficult to say exactly what this implies, considering the potential relationship between this mythic dragon fruit and the ancient sea dragon revered on Wano, Fishman Island, and Alabasta. What does this mean for our mythic sea dragon Ryujin? It really depends on what material was used to create mythical zones. The creatures on which ancient zones are based, like dinosaurs, once lived but are now extinct. But did the mythical creatures ever really live in the One Piece world, or do they, like Paramethea powers, arise from man's imagination? The question of what devil fruit were made from is going to be increasingly important, particularly as the Wano arc draws to a close. Zunisha said it heard the drums of liberation beating for the first time in centuries, and told Momo that Joy Boy has returned, coinciding with the awakening of Luffy's devil fruit. Does this mean Luffy's power is somehow a manifestation of Joy Boy's personal dream, or was the power once wielded by the central figure of the world's lost epoch, which retains some indelible mark Luffy's predecessor left behind? There are many possibilities for who created the devil fruit, but whether or not Imu was responsible for making them, the symbolism strongly indicates he used them to tempt the 20 kings and successfully trap them in a now 8 centuries old Faustian bargain. As I detailed in an earlier video, I think it's possible the downfall of the Lunarians marks year 0 on the Sea Circle calendar. While I have presented evidence that devil fruit originated during the Void Century, as noted, the allusion to Eden and the angels with flaming swords may indicate the devil fruit were stolen and dispersed much earlier in history, which could explain Joy Boy having some prior association with Luffy's fruit if this is indeed the case. There's one last aspect of devil fruit we need to discuss, which is particularly relevant as Wano draws to a close: awakening.
This better not awaken anything in me.
Doflamingo referred to awakening as an entirely new level of devil fruit power, and this term is quite interesting given the frequency with which Oda has used sun and moon, or day and night motifs throughout the entire series to describe the central narrative conflict. The One Piece world is presently in a state of night. As the lyrics of Big Saki state, the sun set on Joy Boy's era, but the moon guides adventurers through the night in pursuit of impossible dreams, as the world awaits a new dawn. Roger asserted dreams are one of the immutable forces which help guide the world toward freedom, so it's rather interesting when we consider the idea that devil fruit are living entities of some kind, and that they may represent a manifestation or distillation of dreams. What happens when dreams awaken? From what we've seen, awakening doesn't produce brand new, tangentially related abilities. The awakened Paramethea powers used by Katakuri and Doflamingo extended beyond their hosts' bodies and altered or transformed the properties of their surrounding environment. Using awakening, Kid was able to magnetize other objects and people, not just himself. In similar fashion, Law was able to attach his sphere of silence to Big Mom. In short, awakening is an extension of a devil fruit's natural powers, not something completely unrelated. Awakening is not like Bankai and Bleach, or special Nen abilities in Hunter x Hunter, the explanations for which could hardly fit on modern Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Awakening is still mysterious, and it's unclear what it entails for the various types of Devil Fruit. It seems we have the clearest picture of awakened Paramethea, which, as described, transform the properties of not only the user's body, but also their surroundings. Logia fruit are already incredibly powerful without awakening, but I suspect Punk Hazard demonstrates the impact of awakened Logia in permanently altering the ecosystem, which makes me wonder whether battles between awakened Logias in the distant past are responsible for strange phenomena witnessed on islands like Enies Lobby and Raijin Island. Interestingly, despite the Jailer Beasts being the first awakened Devil Fruit users introduced in the series, we know the least about awakened Zone Fruit. The Jailer Beasts were revealed to be awakened Zone Fruit users in Chapter 544 by Sir Crocodile, which was also the first time the concept of awakening was introduced. Crocodile indicated that awakened Zone Fruit users feature both heightened strength and recovery speed. What's less certain are the conditions of awakening zone powers. It seems based on the terminology, the soul or spirit resident in the fruit awakens or more fully incarnates in the material world, allowing greater manipulation or control. But what does this mean for zone powers? The awakened zone fruit users we have seen thus far never reverted to their non-awakened state even when unconscious. Does this mean awakening is an irreversible process for zone users? Were the Jailer Beasts in Impel Down transformed into mindless beasts because the soul of the animal contained in their fruit overtook their human persona, or were they naturally dim-witted? This begs the question, would Kaido retain control of his ability and his persona if he fully awakened his Devil Fruit? Does awakening represent the soul of the fruit overtaking the individual by which it was eaten, a runaway daydream, so to speak? When you think about it, the dream or desire of the fruit ordinarily is confined to the user's body. It can only transform the properties of the individual by whom it was eaten in its non-awakened state, but awakened, that power expands. The domain of the fruit's will to transform reality and bend it to its will increases to encompass the user's surroundings, much like Haki or willpower. Strengthening Haki or awakening a Devil Fruit expands its sphere of influence, representing a sort of subjugation of the objective reality to the will of the individual. But is this good or bad? After all, we are talking about the Devil's Fruit, which, as discussed earlier, is perhaps no misnomer. It's important to note that Haki in One Piece is morally neutral. Both morally upstanding individuals like Luffy and evil villains like Doflamingo are equally capable of using Conqueror's Haki. In other words, both good and bad people can have exceptionally strong willpower. As Neptune said, every weapon depends on how it's used. I bring this up because Devil Fruit are indeed a powerful weapon, and if my assertion is correct, their power represents the individual will subjugating and claiming dominion over objective reality. But this act isn't framed as morally good or morally evil, just as the line dividing good and evil does not evenly parse between pirate and marine. Those with exceptionally strong willpower may be either good or evil. This is important to understand, because the sea, which represents freedom in the One Piece world, rejects those who have eaten the Devil Fruit. Submersion in water completely drains their strength and renders them unable to swim. This may suggest that Devil Fruit originate from the world's oppressors, in which case the soul material used to make these living weapons was likely stolen or surrendered by the 20 kings who neglected to read the fine print when making their Faustian bargain, in which case it's easy to see why those who wield these powers would be cursed. But if this power was simply stolen, if these distilled or manifest dreams can be a force for good in the right hands, it would indicate that those who wield these powers could, in theory, achieve harmony with the sea, the representation of freedom in the One Piece world, if reconciliation of some kind is made with their true divine or benevolent point of origin. A friend of mine noted the fact that Buggy and Toki, the only known Devil Fruit users on Roger's crew, both fell ill as the Roger pirates closed in on discovering Laugh-Tale, and if the treasure One Piece is deeply connected to the sea itself, then perhaps the final island also rejects those who wield these powers. This could theoretically represent a major obstacle for the Straw Hats, considering Luffy, Robin, Chopper, and Brook have all eaten Devil Fruit. This is admittedly speculative, but it does lend weight to the idea that there needs to be some sort of atonement for the theft of these perhaps divine powers.
And you have meddled with the primal forces of nature. And you will atone.
Another thing to keep in mind is that those in the One Piece world who call themselves gods are in fact servants of the real devil, and the enemies of the so-called gods are in truth the heroes the age demands, so it would seem equally possible that devil fruit are similarly mislabeled. Of course, all of this is purely speculation, but I do wonder what could emerge from a fully awakened devil fruit power if they indeed contain souls. What could be the relationship between Luffy's devil fruit and Joy Boy? Could the fruit's awakening, the manifestation of the soul contained within, somehow signify Joy Boy's return beyond Luffy simply inheriting his will? Further, if my assertion regarding the importance of the mythical fish fruit is correct, that the sea dragon based on Ryujin, revered on Fishman Island, Wano, Alabasta, and potentially even Elbaf, played a pivotal role in the distant past, then what would happen if Kaido's fruit fully awakened? What form might the world's strongest creature take in the final phase of this battle, intended to at last deliver the new dawn to Wano? And beyond Wano, what might this tell us about other powerful devil fruit like Blackbeard's Darkness Logia? There are of course still many unanswered questions. Why is there only one of each devil fruit power? What living element was used to bring Logia and Paramethea powers to life? Were the devil fruit dispersed during the Void Century or much earlier at the end of the Age of Heaven? Were they made to do good, to do evil, or does that depend entirely on the individuals by whom they are wielded? Did these powers originate by supernatural or scientific process? The ancient One Piece world seems to have had sufficiently advanced knowledge, and as noted, Willie Caron was a physicist. Vegapunk seems to have uncovered many of these mysteries through his research, yet there also appears to be a very real cosmic scale battle of good and evil at work behind the scenes. It would seem we may very soon have answers to many of these questions as the story is now entering its final saga, and Vegapunk may finally make his grand entrance into the narrative following Wano. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please leave a like. If you want to be notified when future videos, including the next part of this video series, are released, please consider subscribing and remember to hit the bell icon to turn on notifications. It really helps this channel grow and I really appreciate your support. But most important, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the origin and true nature of devil fruit? Make sure you let me know your thoughts down in the comments.